Morning, everybody. Welcome to the 25th Celestis Memorial Spaceflight. I say that with a little bit of surprise and a great deal of pride. We started this effort with our first mission in 1997, flying out of the Canary Islands, which, by the way, if you haven't been there, go tomorrow. They call it Europe's Hawaii for a reason. And aboard that flight, 25 flights ago, we had 24 folks, 24 pioneers, including the creator of Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry, the 60s icon, Timothy Leary, and 22 what I call normal folks, truck drivers, unfortunately a couple of children. But that was the beginning of what's culminating today in one of our most impressive missions that you guys are on board. Your loved ones are on board, and you're on board spiritually with that. Today we're going to celebrate the lives of 166 folks who are on the mission tomorrow, and we'll get into much of the detail of the mission. It's really cool, and we're honored to have a representative here today from the exploration company of Munich, Germany. It's Munich, right? And really interesting technology. We've come a long way in these 25 missions, but during those 25 missions, we've been to the moon. We currently have, I think it's around 360 folks, including 5 of the original Star Trek cast members, 2 NASA astronauts, and again, a whole bunch of just everyday folks that are heading on a 2.5-year journey out into deep space, where it will, about 300 million kilometers, orbit the sun for as long as the sun is there. But we've also done a number of Earth orbit missions and a number of Earthrise missions, which is what your mission is classified as. What makes Earthrise special is that you'll receive the flown capsule of your loved one back from us as soon as we get them back from the mission. So you'll have a forever keepsake from the launch tomorrow. And we're just thrilled to be able to provide that service for everyone here and welcome you again. We have a pretty full agenda this morning. I'd like to begin, though, with the presentation of the colors and the flag folding ceremony. We're honored to have the Vandenberg Space Force Base Honor Guard here with us this morning. And I can turn it over to them now for the presentation of the colors. Gentlemen?
Colors, reason, horse. Horse. Colors, sorry, horse.
They will be back. It's a special honor to have all the veterans that we have on this flight, by the way. Now I'd like to introduce Pipe Major Mark Little, who will serenade us with God Bless America. Now I'd like to invite the Space Force Honor Guard back in, and we'll do the flag folding ceremony. Gentlemen.
Please rise for the plane of hats. I think it would be okay to thank them. Please be seated.
We have one more selection by Major Mark Little, Amazing Grace. Thank you, Major. Thanks, sir. Our enterprise and your service intermingles two fundamental strains in our culture. One is the technology development that allows us to perform this unique service. But that technology development occurs in the context of human civilization because we, unlike most other space missions, are intricately tied to the humans that we're serving. And I can't think of anybody better to bring that into context for you. We think long and hard about who we invite to speak at this very compelling service. And I really can't think of anybody better than the representative we have today from our service provider. And to introduce Dr. Erica Wagner, I'd like to bring forward the Celestis Chief Operating Officer, Andrea Quascargas, to introduce Dr. Wagner. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. It's my pleasure to be here with you all to introduce Dr. Erica Wagner. She is the lead for U.S. business development at the Exploration Company, our trusted launch service provider for the Perseverance flight. Dr. Wagner is a pioneering voice in commercial spaceflight. with a remarkable background that includes her work at Blue Origin and her current leadership in advancing reusable spacecraft and lunar exploration. Today, she joins us to share her perspective on the role of spaceflight in the development of human civilization and the deeper meanings that these journeys hold for us all. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Erica Wagner.
Hi, y'all. Thanks for having me here today. Thanks for trusting us with your loved ones and for being part of this journey with us. I wanted to make a few remarks that are personal and then share a little bit about where we are at this time in spaceflight history and then a bit about the mission that we're embarking on with this flight and a little bit about the exploration company. So let me start first, though. This guy with the side eye, that's my dad. I lost him 6 months ago. And he is a large part of the reason I stand here today, and besides the obvious reasons, but because he had a curiosity and a passion for this planet that was contagious. When I was a little kid, this is the very first book I ever remember owning. I remember sitting on Dad's lap as he would read to me about the planets and the stars, but also the oceans and the plants and the things that surrounded us, and the way that they connected from this far-off place to this place that we lived and loved. When I was a kid, my dad and I drove from Atlanta, Georgia, all the way down in the middle of the night to go see a space shuttle launch in Cape Canaveral. And while that looks like a lovely sunrise, what it really becomes just a few seconds later is a arching phoenix rising up towards the stars. And I remember that morning being so struck by what happened next. Because this was a dawn launch, so the sun is rising as the rocket is climbing. And what you can actually see a little bit in the contrail here, the contrail as the rocket was climbing went from pink to yellow to white as it climbed up through the sunrise. And I remember just being so struck by the way in which our planet interacted with things that were leaving our planet. The way that it left these fingerprints on the launch. The way that you could see the high winds that changed directions as the rocket climbed. And there's even, it's a little hard with the contrast here, but you can even see a shadow cast by the rising sun up through the rocket contrail as it climbed. And these are the kinds of things that my dad used to love to point out, was the details, the little details that made life so beautiful. So as my career evolved, this was my last job down at Blue Origin at our launch site in western Texas. And it sort of brings up two main themes for me about where we are in this time in spaceflight history. The first is that the object standing behind me is the New Shepard rocket. This is the very first rocket to go to space and come back and be reused in full. The space shuttle we got to use parts of, but it took thousands and thousands of hours to prepare for flight, and we had to add pieces back. So the New Shepard rocket was one of these first milestones where we started to be reusable. And while that's a technical matter of interest, what it does, practically speaking, is it drives down the cost of access to space. And as we do that, we start to open the doors wider and wider and wider. And this is one of the reasons that I've been passionate about being in the space industry for more than 2 decades now, is the way that we are starting to see that space is not just for the few, but it is for all of us. And it's for all of us in ways that are deeply personal, in ways that are economic and technological and practical. But increasingly, we are connecting people from all over the world with this promise of space belonging to us all. The guy in the cowboy hat was my boss for many years. That's Jeff Bezos, the owner of Blue Origin. And this was the first day that we got a chance to send humans to space on that rocket. And actually, the story I want to tell you is not Jeff's. You've all read plenty of Jeff's story. The much more interesting story on this flight was Wally Funk. So Wally, at 82 years young, became that day the oldest person to have ever traveled to space. Wally was a member of what we call the Mercury 13. So back when the Mercury 7 were selected by NASA to be on the cover of Time Life magazine and be our first US representatives into space, they also was a group of 13 women that were selected. And they went through the same medical training, much of the same flight training, much of the same preparations, and never got a chance to fly. Wally had an amazing career working for the FAA, the NTSB, putting thousands and thousands of hours on many different kinds of aircraft. And when she stepped out of that space capsule at 82 years old, with this giant grin and an infectious laugh, she became literally, there had been no one waiting on this planet longer to go to space than Wally had, right? A few flights later, we had a chance to fly Ed Dwight. And now Ed, in 1961, was selected by John F. Kennedy to be America's first black astronaut. The 60s being what they were, he never got a chance to fly. He was an honored US Air Force test pilot and veteran who later took a second career in sculpture. He's got some amazing sculpture in museums all over the world now. And when Ed got a chance to fly, he came down and he said, I had told myself for all these years that I didn't really need to go. I lied. And I love these stories because they tell us a few things. One is the passion for space that lives deep inside so many people, the passion to go and to be a part of this amazing journey. The other is the way in which the doors to spaceflight are opening wider and wider, not just our military test pilots, and not just from the US and the Soviet Union, but increasingly we are saying space is for all of us. This is a smattering of folks that flew on another flight with Blue. We are seeing nations from around the world now joining us in space. Miami Dolphins fans, not a nation, but maybe a nation unto themselves. But we have since these early days of flight now, the Blue Origin rockets flew the very first astronauts from Portugal, the first woman from Egypt, the first openly LGBTQ astronaut, the first parent and child, the first married couple. We're seeing that these doors are opening. And as the doors open wider, they reflect back to us that we are inclusive, we are included. We have kids that are looking up and seeing people who look like them and saying, and this is a place where I belong. We're seeing nations that are now coming into space for all sorts of purposes, not just human spaceflight, but increasingly monitoring their crops, looking after their people after disasters. In fact, I found this graph really interesting for those who like data and are nerdy like I am. This is a graph of the number of countries that have launched their first satellite. And you see in the early days of spaceflight, that was very few, and we've continued to accelerate. There are now more than 80 countries with space agencies. There are 102 members of the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs. Space is increasingly opening to the entire world. And that's really why I joined the exploration company. So about 6 months ago, I was delighted to get a phone call from the CEO, Hélène Huby, who is one of the most successful women entrepreneurs in the space world and one of the most successful fundraisers, who has Europe's fastest growing space company. We had just come to the US in the last year, and this is actually our first launch out of the US today. So just a little bit of who we are and what we do. Europe's fastest growing space startup has raised Series A and Series B that have been the largest ever space rounds in Europe. The company has grown on the heels of that investment to over 300 people. Headquarters, as Charlie mentioned, is in Munich and in Bordeaux. We just opened offices in Torino, Italy, and in Luxembourg, and in Houston, Texas. So as we continue to grow, the role of the exploration company is to build bridges, to have space for collaborative and peaceful purposes, and to ensure that this democracy that's happening and the reduction in cost that's coming with reusability are being shared widely. Our very first mission launched on Ariane 6, a European rocket, last year. It was carried aloft, and then the upper stage of the Ariane had some issues. And so we have been staying on a long-duration experience up in orbit. You can actually still look down and see our spacecraft and the Earth behind it. But we called that mission Bikini because it was teeny-weeny. It was a huggable spacecraft, about 60 centimeters across. And it was really meant to be a demo for us, learning how to make spacecraft, learning how to fly. The mission that your loved ones are on is what we call Mission Possible. And so this has gone from a huggable spacecraft to something closer to the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, about 2.5 meters across, 1.5 metric tons. We have a lot of technology advancements that are taking us towards our ultimate sort of arc in this storyline, which is our NIX vehicle. NIX is designed to be a 4-meter capsule that'll go to the International Space Station in 2028. It's being developed jointly between NASA and the European Space Agency to carry cargo up, and we're talking about eventually flying crew on this vehicle as well. And so you see this lovely story arc, right, that goes from small technologies, a tiny team doing things on a shoestring budget, to a much more capable vehicle with much more advanced technologies, and then really stepping up towards the most modern of space vehicles. And as we think about where we go from here, we are looking out at a wide range of destinations for crew and cargo in Earth orbit. We have contracts with 3 of the future space stations that are being designed for NASA right now. To cislunar space, and whether that is the Gateway or other destinations that'll be there with NASA and the Artemis program. And then looking actually at the lunar surface itself, because many of these technologies lead us to be able to be a logistics provider that takes anything, anywhere it needs to go in space. So our mission, hopefully, fingers crossed, launching tomorrow here from Vandenberg, is designed to be an orbital spaceflight with 2 revolutions around the Earth. So it will launch out of Vandenberg, it will make 2 revolutions, and then the rocket will actually help to send it back on its way for splashdown sort of between the Aleutian Islands and the Hawaiian Islands, so in the middle of the Pacific. This is allowing us to mature our technologies, but also to serve all of our customers who are on board with a few hours of space experience, microgravity time for those who are doing science, views of Earth, because we are going to be traveling around the planet at about 17,000 miles per hour. Joining us in this journey are a few other vehicles that I think are interesting and friends who are helping us along the way. This is Crescenzio and Raphael. They left about a week ago out of Dutch Harbor, Alaska on our recovery ship. So they're out there and getting ready for the pickup of the vehicle when it comes back down. And Ari and Carrie are colleagues from NASA. They are launching out of Edwards Air Force Base on a Gulfstream G3. They run a program called SciFly. So NASA has an aircraft flying that'll be monitoring this vehicle with a spectrometer, with ultra-high definition telescopes, helping us to understand the physics of what's going on during our reentry, and also helping us with spotting for recovery. On board the vehicle, in addition to your loved ones, we have 25 other payloads from more than 10 countries. And I wanted just to tell you a little bit about the other things that are flying and the reasons that this vehicle and this mission mean so much to us. So RISE is a company out of Romania. They are flying a fluid physics experiment. It turns out that when you take fluids into microgravity, air doesn't rise and water doesn't sink. We don't have convection, we don't have sedimentation, so the fluid physics are really, really different. And we need to understand that for things like refueling spacecraft, for providing medical care in space, for providing agricultural environments for plants to grow. And so they're looking at a lot of the details and the physics of how fluids work. The bottom picture here is a company out of Nevada called EcoAtoms. EcoAtoms has been doing really well with getting NASA funding to advance technologies mostly around biology and life sciences. In this experiment, they have microorganisms that are freeze-dried, and they're looking at the way that those organisms reconstitute and come back to life when they're in microgravity as they are rehydrated. So that's really relevant if you're looking at cell biology. It's relevant when we're looking at things like the ways that ecosystems on space stations grow and evolve with space flights, as we think about the microbiome of the astronauts that are living on board. The Rakia project is coming out of Israel. They're flying an art package that is mostly photographs, sort of reflecting humanity up into space and the ways in which space and Earth are connected. And then this little one down at the bottom from Robinson Aerospace. This was a company founded by an undergraduate student in Australia who's been working with students all over the world to teach them how to build small sats. They're advancing some of their satellite technology with middle schoolers and high schoolers that have been journeying with us along this path and connecting the things that they're learning in the classroom to the way that you do hands-on development. And I think that this sort of ecosystem of things that are flying, it's technology, it's science, it's art, it's humanity, right? These are the doors that are opening broader and more democratism, in a more democratized way every day with the changes that are happening in our industry. So I'll reflect here. This is Heidi Stefanisson-Piper, one of the NASA astronauts, hanging out in the cupola of the International Space Station and looking back at our planet. And when we think about the why we go to space, so much of this is really about understanding this place that we come from, following the dreams that so many have had, staring up at the stars, and the ways that we connect sort of inherently and deeply with the cosmos around us. And there's a quote from T.S. Eliot that talks about exploring. And when we explore, we will come home and know it again for the first time. And I think that what we found, and there's stories upon stories of the overview effect of astronauts going and looking back at the planet and feeling this connection to the people around them, to the planet itself, to their place in our universe, that I think is really beautiful. And I hope we get to share with more and more and more of humanity. Again, I'll close with my dad. He was an Earth guy who loved to stare up at the stars. We're remembering him this summer on a beach out on the Olympic National Park in Washington State. But I think when we think about the lives that our loved ones lived, the dreams that they had, we are just so honored to be able to share this experience with you, to have you on board our flight, and to carry your dreams up towards the stars. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Erica. We've got a couple of things here for you. Can't go anywhere without a certificate on your wall, right? So we thank you very much for joining us for the Perseverance flight. And you cannot have a space mission without mission badges. Thank you so much. First of all, if you're taking applications for that office in Bordeaux, I imagine there are a few people that would put them in. I think you see the fundamental, so many things she said resonated with me. We started the company in 1997. There hadn't been any tourists in space. That wasn't even a concept then. And we thought, how do we open up space for the everyday person? How do we democratize, great term, space? And I knew, because I started out in the rocketry business, blowing up rockets 2 islands up from Boca Chica on a little island called Matagorda Island, Texas. I've known forever that when you're sitting there waiting for liftoff and something of yours is on board, or somehow you're directly connected to that flight, it's just a completely different feeling than if you're watching a few highly trained civil servants orbit the planet that your taxpayers are funding. It's real, it's available, you're experiencing it real time. And they have a little catching up to do with us. We'll be over 2,500 people put into space, serving 35 nations from our history. But it's all about opening that frontier that Erica described so well to all of us, to giving all of us an opportunity to experience space in a very real sense. The other thing you see is that we're not flying alone. We always go with science, with engineering, with technology, with commercial developments, so that in some way your loved ones are helping to contribute to the growth in the availability of spaceflight. That's a very real effect that we've had over the years and that we continue to have. And you should feel that privilege tomorrow when you're standing there waiting for that thing to take off. you'll have a feeling that you can't duplicate by watching it on TV. You can't duplicate by doing any other memorial service. And I know that you're in good hands with the Exploration Company. They're a very impressive group, and we're delighted to be on the mission. So next we're going to hear from our violinist, Hallie McAlpine, and I ask her to start with a selection that in many ways is the reason that I'm doing what I do today. In 1968, yeah, that long ago, as a teenager, I saw the movie 2001, A Space Odyssey, when it first came out. And I got to tell you, never before and never since have I sat in my seat at a theater for 20 minutes after the movie ended and just awed. And much of what awed me, besides Kubrick's amazing direction, was the music that was chosen. And one of the best scenes in 2001 to me is when we're first in orbit and we hear Strauss's beautiful Blue Danube. So I'd like to ask Hallie to honor us with that selection now, please. Thank you. So this mission is really for you, about you, of you, and more importantly, of your loved ones who you've chosen to entrust to us and to Erica's company to honor in, I think, about the coolest way you can. We have 166 participants from all over on board this flight. And what we'd like to do is we like to honor each of those participants. So there's two ways that we do this. The first is through our honor roll, where we will read the names of each participant. And the second is many of you have chosen to speak today about your loved one and about why either your loved one always wanted to go to space or you always wanted to send them to space, whichever one is appropriate. So we're gonna start with our Director of Client Services, who many of you know better than any other Celestis member of the staff, Faith Gonzalvo, and she'll read the first selection of names. Come on up, Faith.
The honored participants on board the Perseverance flight: Neil Abbey, Alan Paul Adams, Alex Leonard Alenikoff, Manuel Amaral, Alistair William Hamish Anderson, Melvin Doyle Bear, Jacob Gerald Baker, David Balashish, Dieter Barth, Robert Allen Bauman, Dave Becker, Joseph Robert Ernest Bob Belland, Stephen James Burns, John Darren Binder, Robert Bob Roy Blackburn, Todd Anthony Bliss, Donald Bond, Linda Sue Braun, Hugh Benjamin Brazil, Neil Allen Britt, Nancy Wagner Brooks, Clarice Terry Brown, Alexander Douglas Burns, Armand Peter Kamens, Michael D. Carl, Philip Kenyon Chapman, SCD, Raymond Elliott Chavala Sr., Leonard John Chinelli, Andrew Coleman, James Raymond Cox, Stanley Ralph Curry Jr., James Wilbert Cutbirth, Michael Jason Doherty, Donald Davies, Carol Davis, Todd Michael Dean, Gary DeFore, Stephanie Ann Donahue, William Donovan, and Ronnie Draves.
Thank you. And she'll be back. Next, we have a reading by a friend of ours, John DiDonna, who is a Shakespearean actor. He's often live at our events. He couldn't make this one, but we have a great video of him. He's going to read to you something that I believe is one of the best things I've ever seen. And the selection by Aaron Freeman is called "You Want a Physicist to Speak at Your Funeral." So let's roll that, Keith.
You Want a Physicist to Speak at Your Funeral, a poem by Aaron Freeman. You want a physicist to speak at your funeral. You want the physicist to talk to your grieving family about the conservation of energy, so they will understand that your energy has not died. You want the physicist to remind your sobbing mother about the first law of thermodynamics, that no energy gets created in the universe and none is destroyed. You want your mother to know that all your energy, every vibration, every BTU of heat, every wave of every particle that was her beloved child remains with her in this world. You want the physicist to tell your weeping father that amid energies of the cosmos, you gave as good as you got. And at one point, you'd hope that the physicist would step down from the pulpit and walk to your broken-hearted spouse there in the pew and tell them that all the photons that ever bounced off your face, all the particles whose paths were interrupted by your smile, by the touch of your hair, hundreds of trillions of particles have raced off like children, their ways forever changed by you. And as your widow rocks in the arms of a loving family, may the physicist let them know that all the photons that bounced from you were gathered in the particle detectors that are their eyes. That those photons created within them constellations of electromagnetically charged neurons whose energy will go on forever. And the physicist will remind the congregation of how much of all our energy is given off as heat. There may be a few fanning themselves in their programs, as he says it. And he will tell them that the warmth that flowed through you in life is still here, still part of all that we are, even as we who mourn continue the heat of our own lives. And you'll want the physicist to explain to those who loved you that they need not have faith. Indeed, they should not have faith. Let them know that they can measure. that scientists have measured precisely the conservation of energy and found it accurate, verifiable, and consistent across space and time. You can hope your family will examine the evidence and satisfy themselves that the science is sound and that they'll be comforted to know your energy is still around. According to the law of the conservation of energy, not a bit of you is gone. You're just less orderly. Amen.
We'll now ask Hallie to do her second number. I think you'll recognize it. Okay, thank you. So from my perspective, we're about to enter into the best part of the memorial service, and we call this the Family Stories section. But before we get to those family stories, I'd like to ask Andrea to come up and continue our honor roll. Oh, Faith took the board. Okay. And we'll get the board back very quickly. Thank you for your patience. No worries.
John B. Drescher, Wesley Melvin Dreyer, Marjorie Dufton, Paul Owen Dumont, Scott Kareem Donahue, Zentokuen Iyu, Robert Todd Evans, Patricia Margaret Fossey, Wendell James Fox Jr., Katsuko Fukuda, Masanari Furukara, Gary Gartner, Michael Dean Gator, Wayne Edward Gill, David A. Gluick, Doreen Goldbrunn, Corey Lee Goodson, Sharon Gowerly, J. Clinton Hall, Philip Robert Hasselton, Kuniko Hattori, David Hayes, Ricky Heisey, Kyoku Ino, Marlon Johnson, George Johnson Jr., Casey Jones, Connie Sue Jones, Devland Jones, Catherine Kusera Joseph, Cheryl Marie Kotz, Fumio Kawasaka, Alan Kellett, Cindy Kidd, Brian Edward Kirk, David Dean Klafke, James Klein Jr., Robert Klungel, Carrie Koch, Natalie Koch, Robert Allen Koenig. Thank you.
Memorial service is such a personal thing. We're delighted that many of you have chosen to share with us your personal feelings today. And I will invite you up to speak at this point. If the speaker is accompanied by family members who want to come up and stand with the speaker while he or she is speaking, please feel free to. And our first speaker is Melissa Stockman for participant Robert Blackburn. Sorry. Do we have Melissa? Yes. Ah, great. Welcome, Melissa.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa. I am the daughter of Bob Blackburn. Today I will share, celebrate, and honor the journey of my father's life. My dad accomplished so many remarkable things throughout his life. Even though he was a man of few words, he was always passionate about sharing his knowledge with others. He had a degree in aerospace engineering and a master's in math. After college, he went on to work for NASA, and in his spare time earned his pilot's license. Then after completing his master's, he started teaching as a college professor in calculus. My father consistently found ways to incorporate everyday life into each lesson, always challenging himself to learn more. Learning was his passion, but teaching was his purpose. I was one of the most challenging students he ever had to teach. Yet he never gave up on me as I grew. He had shown me that life is full of infinite possibilities, as long as I remain open to realizing and accepting them. From him, I learned that taking the road less traveled is about self-discovery and finding one's purpose. In his later years, he found himself writing proposals that were accepted all around the world. Some of his projects included developing de-icing agents for freeways and helping implement photo radar in Arizona, and thank you so much, Dad, for that speeding ticket. Somehow, he had always found a way to persevere, never losing sight of the end goal. Thank you for passing on all of your wisdom, brilliance, and determination. There is no doubt in my mind that aboard the Perseverance flight, my dad will achieve his lifelong dream of reaching space. Our family will always remember the love, devotion, and guidance you provided. We will love you and enjoy
the ride that you spent a lifetime earning. Thank you.
Next, we have Jennifer Kalett Barton for Dr. Alan Kalett.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer. I'm the daughter of my father, Alan Kalett, and this is my husband, Andrew Barton, son-in-law, favorite son-in-law. He only had one daughter. Alan lived in a glory time for space flight. He has a patent on the Mercury capsule. He was the chief engineer of the Apollo 11 command module. I was very young, so I don't remember all his time working in space, but it always enthused him. Whenever he would talk about his time working for NACA, as it was originally called, NASA, Rockwell, McDonnell Douglas, any of the places he worked on, his eyes would glow. And he would think about this and really admired everybody who worked on that program, all the engineers like him, all the scientists, the mathematicians. My mother was a NASA computer, just like in Hidden Figures. And also the astronauts. So he always thought that at the rate the space program was going, that it would be, just a matter of time in his 40s or maybe 50s, he would be the one to travel into space, riding those shuttles to the moon, walking around on the surface, getting to see the Earth from space. And, well, things didn't happen that way. But Erica, I'm so pleased that you and your company are democratizing space, because he would be so thrilled to see that that's finally coming to pass. And even though it's just a little bit of him that gets to go, he's going to be so honored to travel on this flight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to invite Stephen Klafke and Paula Williams to speak for David Klafke.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Klafke. I'm son of David, and then this is my sister, Paula, daughter of David, and then I have my mom and nephew, so wife and grandson of David. And so our story is a little different, but I think it's to the same spirit of this, democratization of space. So David, my father, was really a humble person, didn't go to college. He retired after 43 years working at Safeway Albertsons, so wasn't someone who came from a lot of money, but he always inspired my sister and I to always pursue our dreams. And so what I remember is being a kid and Star Trek would be on, right? Next Generation, the first one, and I'd be like, Dad, what's that? And I'd watch it with him, and suddenly I'd be enthralled, in Star Trek, and I'm like, now I'm a Trekkie, now I'm a nerd. And then we'd, wait in line at the movie theaters, at 1 a.m. for the new Star Wars to come out, or the remakes and things like that. So that's where our love really, my sister and I really started from there. But then they also made sure to take us to Cape Canaveral. My mom's from Florida, so they had the privilege of being out there and actually seeing NASA, launch out of there. So we got to go and explore that. And so that's really, our story is we are just so honored and privileged to be part of this with such notable people that, just spoke. And I think that's kind of the story here, and the theme is that it's our honor to have our father be part of this. So thank you very much. It's really an honor for us.
I'm Paula. Good morning. Have a little different experience because I was the firstborn, so he must have tried Star Trek out on me and it didn't work. But I do remember it being on all the time and learning the difference between Star Trek and Star Wars, and growing up with space posters in my bedroom, and just my dad taking me out looking at the stars with the telescope and things like that. So I'm going to share a couple of things that were really important to me about my dad growing up. My dad used to hide this little stuffed owl, my mom's favorite animal, in the house for me to find when I came home from school. And it made me laugh because sometimes it would be like in plain sight, and sometimes it would be upside down, hidden somewhere cute. But that was his way of teaching me to be curious. My dad also taught me the difference between Star Trek and Star Wars. And I remember watching it with him just because he liked it so much. But that taught me how to do things for my dad that I liked just because he liked them. He liked going on roller coasters, and nobody else in our family would go on a roller coaster with him. So I did it, and he taught me how to be brave. He also taught me how to play basketball. I was always the last kid picked in gym to be on a team, and I don't think he knew that, but as soon as I showed interest in sports, he was the first one to help me learn. So he taught me how to be a team player as well. My dad also, my favorite memory is that my dad bet me $1 that I couldn't learn all the lyrics to the Billy Joel song, "We Didn't Start the Fire," which is really long. And just because it was for $1, I did it anyways. And I would sit in the bathroom and play the song over and over on a cassette tape. And I learned how to play it, and so he taught me really a love of music. So my dad was curious, brave, a team player, a builder, lover of music, and the best husband, father, grandpa in the world. We love you, Dad.
Thank you. And we're honored to have your dad on board. Our next speaker is Richard Buzz Jones for Connie and Casey Jones. Okay. Well, we know they're on board. How about Kelly Dreyer for Wesley Dreyer? We have Kelly. There we are. Welcome, Kelly.
So I actually forgot that I signed up to do this because I've been doing about half a dozen media interviews over the last week or so. So we're just going to wing it. And yes, that is an aerospace joke in honor of my dad, Wes Dreyer, who was an aerospace engineer. It sounds like he's joining a lot of fellow engineers. They're probably all up there swapping stories and talking about all of their accomplishments and probably some failures, because we all know there were failures. One of the biggest unfortunate failures that my dad worked on was the Challenger explosion, and he was tasked, along with a team, of finding out what exactly happened. That all occurred before I was born, but I've grown up hearing about it. But the biggest thing that I remember about my dad in aerospace was the Global Hawk, which was Northrop Grumman's unmanned aerial vehicle. He loved that probably more than he loved me. He had a VHS that if you came over to our house, you were forced to watch that VHS all about the Global Hawk. But yeah, that was his space baby, and also his Corvette. So unfortunately, he can't take his Corvette with him. But the main reason why we decided to do this was, one, he loved seeing all of the contrails from the rockets, because you can see the contrails from Vandenberg from our house in San Diego. He even pulled over to the side of the road and made my parents late for an event because he had to look at the contrails from the rocket. And The Challenger explosion was a failure of an O seal on one of the rockets, and so he spent many, many hours on that. So I think he would be happy to be right next to the rockets that he loved and creating the contrails that he literally made them late to an event for to see. Thank you.
Cool. Karen Nielsen for Stephen Nielsen. Karen, welcome.
Hello, my name is Karen Garner Nielsen, and I was married to Steve Garner Nielsen for 21 years, 9 months, and 6 days. His first name is Stephen, but only his mother called him that. He literally hated being called Stephen so much that he literally made me promise not to call him Stephen when we exchanged our wedding vows. So I called him Steve. For his entire life, only his mother called him Stephen, but that was okay because he adored her and she adored him as well. Steve was a Cub Scout who earned the highest honor in Cub Scouts, the Arrow of Light, but he'd always say he'd never had an innocent day in his life. A clear example of this was the time he and his brother were setting off fireworks in their backyard while their mother was at work. Somehow they spotted the cops first and ran inside their house. When the cops rang the doorbell and asked if they'd seen anything suspicious, Steve convincingly told them that they'd been inside doing their homework about science. After the cops left, Steve and his brother made a pact to never tell their mom. This lasted for over 2 decades before they found out. Steve was a devoted dad who thrived on being an anti-helicopter parent. Once our son was playing in a piano competition. Another parent asked him if he was worried about how our son would do. Steve said no. She asked him why, because she was extremely worried about how her daughter would do. He said, "I'm not worried because I'm not the person who has to play the piano." However, Steve was adamant that our son join the Boy Scouts. When our son earned his own Arrow of Light, he wore the same Arrow of Light badge that his dad had worn proudly on his own uniform. One of his proudest moments occurred when our son became an Eagle Scout. Steve was an ardent cook and a horrible athlete. Once he made it past the first round of the World Wrestling Federation as a character he invented called the Flying Chef. He gave up his wrestling dreams after hitting the ropes because it hurt, and he decided that baking brownies was easier. Because, as it's been said, brownies make everything better. Steve had an incredible sense of humor. After he lost his lower right leg, people would ask him where his leg had gone. His answers varied from, "It ran away," to, "I'm turning myself into a robot so I can be in the next Star Wars movie." Surprisingly, some people believed him. Steve had an infectious laugh and engaging personality which lit up the room. He was extremely intelligent, traveled to more than a half-dozen countries, was a voracious reader, and loved God. One of his favorite verses was from the Book of Lamentations, and it brought my son Andrew and me much comfort. Though he brings grief, he will show compassion. So great is his unfailing love. And we believe truly that compassion has been extended by Andrew and I helping Steve fulfill his dream of space travel. We enjoy staring death in the face and saying ha, because even after death, you can still make the impossible possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Vaughn Uribe for William McCabe.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Vaughn, and I'll be speaking about my dad, and this is this big guy here. This is my husband. This will be short. Today we are honoring the memory of Dad, who passed in June of last year. And this past Tuesday, we also lost our beloved kitty, Oriole, who was with us for 14 years. And so June is marking some sad occasions, but today is a joyful occasion as we remember Dad. He left us too soon, but sadness does not mean the absence of joy, as we know, right? It's the opposite side of sadness. He will always be with us and remembered for the outstanding person he is and the indelible impact that he's had on our lives. Dad was born and raised in San Francisco and was the third youngest of 8 siblings from a working class family. There were family challenges, economically and otherwise, but with challenge, it can either break you or it can build character. And in Dad's case, it was the latter. He learned resilience, resourcefulness, and empathy. He was very nurturing and protective, even in sacrifice of his own interests. As a young adult, while attending college for art, he was drafted into the Vietnam War. But as a pacifist, he chose to become a conscientious objector. And so he went to Canada, but that didn't last very long. It was just like a few months, and decided to return. He was then subsequently sent to Vietnam. But standing true to his convictions, he refused to take up arms. And so as a result, fortunately, he was sent to a non-combat assignment in Saigon, which is known now as Ho Chi Minh City. And this is where he met my mother. And they fell in love. The year was 1971. In 1972, they married and returned to the States. So we lived in San Francisco, in South San Francisco, and Dad continued his education. He was a lifelong learner, enjoyed learning for its intrinsic value. He really could care less, about the outcomes, such as grades or credentials. He loved to think about the magic and mysteries of the universe, and this informed his art. He was an accomplished artist. His interests, as well as his life philosophy. He practiced Zen Buddhism and was a voracious consumer of books, predominantly in the fantasy genre. He was so intrigued about the mysteries of space and the nature of reality. And so it was no coincidence that eventually he made a career in the aerospace industry. One of the pinnacles of his long career was while at Lockheed Martin, where he made important contributions to the Hubble Space Telescope that launched, in low orbit in 1990. As we know, Hubble revolutionized our understanding of the universe and led to many scientific breakthroughs. This was something that he was very proud of, and we are so very proud of him and his legacy to space exploration. And so while I failed to appreciate it when I was young, I recognize now the huge impact he has had in making me who I am today. I always say that all the good parts of me came from him. So I'm sure Dad is out in the universe and exploring space and countless galaxies now. But this launch is to honor him, his legacy, and for us to experience the wonder of space travel with him. Thank you so much, Dad, with eternal love and gratitude. Thank you.
Well, we have one more person to honor, but before we do that, oftentimes at these services, the Spirit moves someone who wasn't previously wanting to speak, and so I always ask, is there anyone else that would like to share their family story here today? Very good. Thank you so much. So, Susan, may I ask you to come up, and Glenn, if you want to. Glenn. got a new hip and knee and ankle. So for many of our missions, I have the honor and the sadness of flying dear friends of mine. And this mission is no different. We're going to talk about Gary Gartner, and this is his wife Susan, who is with us along with his sister Glenn today. I really thought a lot about what I wanted to say about Gary, and there's so many things that I'm just going to stream of consciousness here for just a moment, if you'll forgive me. I first met Gary on Matagorda Island, Texas in 1981 when we and 25 somewhat crazy Texas investors had decided to build and launch the first privately funded rocket into space. You all may remember Percheron or Conestoga, but we were Elon before Elon, and were led by a gentleman named David Hanna, who had the vision of opening up space to private launches. Gary was not a space geek like I was, but he was a good friend and neighbor of David's, and David needed somebody to keep everybody in line, so he hired Gary. I believe the Texas Monthly article about us called Gary David's chief factotum. Look that word up. But Gary was a joy from the moment that he walked in that motel room in Rockport, Texas. And we shared adventures after we shared blowing up a rocket together. We shared the first private funded launch into space successfully together. But we shared a lot more. We shared time and companionship. And there's no one that was closer to a big brother in my life than Gary Gartner. But Gary had an amazing life. And if I can think of one word to share with you about Gary, it's service. He headed up the Habitat for Humanity program in Houston, where they built 100 houses in a day. Think about that. He spent much of his life working at the Hallmark, which is kind of a legendary home for folks that are somewhere between independent and assisted living. And Gary was the shining light for so many people at the Hallmark. He was an avid fisherman. He loved to hunt. He just loved life. He loved Susan and he loved Glenn. And he went really suddenly, surprisingly, not long ago. And as I said, I think it's entirely appropriate that when Gary was at the beginnings of the commercial space age, that we choose to honor him. Susan chose to honor him with a flight to space. And I have so many memories of my time with the Gartner family that all I can say is it was an honor to know him. And I know, we loved each other and we appreciated each other. So Gary, this one's for you, boss. And we're looking forward to seeing you fly soon.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you. Another selection from Howard, please. All right, I will bring, I guess it's Faith's turn to come back up and continue the honor roll.
John Coe, Claudio Kotnig, William Rudolph Kropp Jr., John William Lash, Curtis Lau, Michael Paul Lee, Russell David Lemaster, Brian Joseph Lewis, Edward Lindley, Christine Longenbaugh, Christopher Keith Manis, William Cahill Manley, Jan Masa, Kazuhiko Matsubara, Robert David Matthews, William McCabe, Melissa Suzanne Migao, Jim Merriman, William Metcalf, James John Myers, H.T. John Mitchell IV, Michelle Ann Miller, Setsuko Mizuide, Susumu Mizuide, Mark Fabian Molava, Franz Moore, Robert Moran, Cody Mosley, Patrick James Murray, Shunkai Naito, Jeffrey Scott Nelson, Amanda Marie Nicholson, Steve Garner Nielsen, Sean Nishanian, Toshinori Noguchi, Louise Ann Odine, Katsuzo Okuyama, Jeremiah Parker, Milan Patel, Arthur Capon Payne Jr., Pablo Martinez Perez, Alvin Joseph T. Perrin, Paula Vida Pitts, Joy Edna Plyler, Kawana Pohi, Doris Sarah Porter, Grant Sellers Pritchard, and Hilton Lee Puckett.
Okay. Couple of more things, but I guess it's time for our closing remarks, and then we'll continue the honor roll and have one last musical selection before we get into the pre-launch briefing. And we're really, thank you, Andy, for waiting us out. You'll love Andy. He's been on the console there at Vandenberg. He is a veteran spaceman and is going to give us his view of what we're all about to experience as part of that pre-launch briefing. I just want to say in closing again, I have a t-shirt, and the t-shirt says, "Space is hard," and it is. What you guys are benefiting from and participating in and bringing into reality is a human endeavor that is seemingly impossible to do, to reach beyond the bounds of Earth and to do meaningful things in space. These days, it's more common to hear about a multi-planetary species and about living off the planet. And that's been a dream of so many people for so long that sometimes we lose the perspective of, hey, we're really doing this. And I like to say that a space launch is a lot like a golf swing. A whole lot of things got to go right for it to be successful. And space is no different than that. We entrust our loved ones to machinery that is undergoing huge stress. There's this thing called max Q, called maximum dynamic pressure, when all the forces of the planet Earth that are trying to keep that rocket back here on Earth all compress at the same time and breaking through max Q. You'll hear that on every launch call out when the vehicle gets past max Q. You can't breathe easy yet, but you know that an important step has been taken. So when we hear the countdown, and when we hear the preparation, and we hear the launch, and we see all of a sudden it liftoff, and I will tell you, when you see that rocket pop up from just beyond the mountains, it's a revelation. A whole lot of things had to go right in order for that to succeed. And we're honored to be able to bring that to you. We couldn't do it without you. You came here not knowing anybody, really, kind of trusting this company out of Texas to do it. Well, you have a lot more reason to trust us than people did in our early days, because we've done 25 of them now, or we're about to do our 25th one now. But I want to take a moment and thank Exploration Company. Thank the Vandenberg launch team. Thank SpaceX. And thank my staff for the huge amount of work that goes into what we're all about to experience. And I like to describe it this way, and I don't say this to take away from anyone's grief and suffering, because we know you all lost someone near and dear to you. But one of the things I take, one of the reasons I've done this for over 30 years is that I love watching that moment when grief turns to joy and exultation. When you know I am sending Mom on something she always wanted to do, and you'll have that feeling at liftoff. Don't totally cheer at liftoff, because we got 2 orbits to go and we got to recover it, but we'll leave that up to Erica's team. But it's an amazing feeling. I think that's, as I said, I think that's one of the main reasons I still do this today, is for over 2,500 folks, I've seen that happen. And it's so comforting to my team and literally all of us that we can provide that for you. Because, you know, I know what it feels like to want to go to space your whole life, or I know what it feels like to memorialize my mom and dad. And I'm just thankful that we have this opportunity in this time to be able to provide this service for you. With that, we will segue here in a moment to our pre-launch briefing, where we have some news for you as well. But we'll conclude with the last of the honor roll, and then we'll ask Hallie to do her final piece also. Thank you.
Arthur Scott Robitzek, John Henry Robson, Harry Henry Rogers, Jacob Ryan, Neil Charles Schoen, John Seabode, James Edward Shane, Caleb Dane Shaw, Hiroyuki Shibao, Masao Shimojo, Clayton Smith, Edwin Smith, Robert Arnold Smith, Seanlos Richard Snowdy, Toucan Space, Jackie Spurlock, Mary Ann Stubbs, Patrick Stuthers, Natsuki Tanji, Ronald Joseph Tardif, John Warren Taylor, John Vincent Taylor IV, Ronald Tharrington, Ernest Andrew Thomas, Rebecca Thomas, David Turkle, MD, Sai Vang, Joe Nick Villarreal, James Thomas Violet, James Matthew Weatherby, Robert Anthony Wellborn, Zachary John Wimmer, Yoichi Yamada, Tomohide Yamazaki, William Ralph Yershin, Yichen Zhang, the Rotary Club of Dr. Phillips Orlando. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those of you that will be viewing this online in an hour or two, thank you all for joining us for our memorial service for the Perseverance flight. We're going to move into the pre-launch briefing. I wanted to say beforehand that I get the privilege of naming all of our flights. And there are some of you here today that have been here before because we had a launch called the Aurora flight that did not reach space, just didn't succeed. I told you space is hard sometimes. But our company was founded on the principle that we're going to get you there. We're not exactly sure when. Don't hold us to it, but we will get you to your objective. And for 24 flights, we've been able to do that. And you know what that takes? That takes perseverance. It takes perseverance on your part. It takes perseverance on Celestis's part. But that's such an important quality that humans have, which is we just don't ever give up. I know that we have had, I think, out of our 24 missions, 3 of them didn't reach their objective, were unsuccessful. We've reflown 2 of those. We're getting ready to refly the 3rd one on the Perseverance launch. But I don't think that anybody, I hope that no one that commits to working with us has an expectation of anything other than the strength of everyone involved to make sure the objective is met. What I tell people is we set our launch dates based on what the people that are providing tell us, but lots of stuff happens in the interim. Sometimes we don't succeed, but we never give up, and we always are able to reach that flight goal. That's one of the reasons why we ask you to send us more ashes than we're going to fly, because we're ready to fulfill that next mission. And it's another reason why it's important that we fly only a symbolic portion of the ashes. So in the still unlikely event that we lose one, and losing means what? It means that the ashes are scattered at sea, basically. But we haven't achieved the goal, but we're always there. We've been around now 30 years. Think about that. That's a long time for any startup company to be in existence. And it's only, I think, the persistence of our team, our investors, and our clients, you guys, that entrust the precious payload of your loved one to us. But that's why I say space is hard, and don't ever hold me to a launch date until you see the flame coming out of the bottom of the rocket. You know it's flying then, but you know it will fly. And that's our commitment to the over 2,500 people that we've flown to date. I want to put that in somewhat perspective. And are we finished with our honor roll? Yeah. Congratulations, ladies, you got through it. 166, that's a lot of names to read out. So if I can ask Hallie to finish the memorial service with a final tune, and we will segue right into our launch briefing and hear from Andy. Thank you.